Good evening, everyone. Good evening to our viewers. Good evening to our special guest tonight. And let me give credit at the top of this program to Globespan, Nohar Singh, Devin Bissoon, and all the others who are working hard behind the scenes to make this program available to you, our viewers in Guyana, the diaspora, and the wider world. I must comment that we have been receiving a lot of feedback from persons in many countries congratulating us on our guests and the depth of our discussions here. And over the past 2 weeks, as I was telling our guests here tonight, we have basically allowed people to take the gloves off and have a go because it is that time of our history. It's election time. Viewers, ladies and gentlemen, a good man once said, I don't care if you stood with the great ones. I care whether you sat with the broken souls. And in these elections, and in Guyana's moving ahead, in charting its own history, one must ask, who really stands for the poor and the downtrodden? Who really can build this country up? This election season represents, in many cases, a lot of people have said, that it represents the big ones, the so-called big ones, going out across the country, promising us all that they will do better this time. The paradoxical view is, of course, anyone maybe can do better than last time because one can argue anything is better than failure. Yet in perspective, each political party is getting down to D-Day when the real test of how they have marketed themselves will be revealed. And taking a cynical seat for a moment, this election has seen new lows in my view. Persons who are paid by taxpayers' money flaunting their position and wealth to promote sheer political gamesmanship. In my view, abusing taxpayers' money to campaign shamelessly. And we have seen an opposition wanting to ensure that the entire population completely forget and erase everything about everything in the past. We have seen the advent of fake news and more fake news, and of course, of all this cyber hate that seems to be popular around. And we have seen some of the smaller parties become unglued in some instances, and their ability to make it to the polls become more questionable each day. But more importantly, we listen to the politicians, many of them, tell us that their brand of lie, their brand of deception is better than the other. And on the other positive note, we listen to politicians tell us of dreams, of perspectives, of wanting to place a country in a particular position in the future, now and of course in the future. In all of this, we have men and women who seems to be so energized that they're at their party and their leader's cause that one has to question sometimes, will any side accept defeat? And on another positive note, all parties have manifested their promises into documents that we hold as their manifestos, which provide an outlook of what they tell us that they may or may not do when they get or retain power. And these manifestos have started to attract the analysis of many people, and of course the defense of many backers. There are quite a number of areas of extreme importance to us all, to this country. Areas that include agriculture, we have dealt with it on this program. Education, we have had extensive discussion about education. The extractive sector, the private sector, and of course the hackneyed but important phrases of transparency, integrity, and honesty. In the mix of it all, of course, are those who are campaigning across this country and to get their feedback on how the campaign is ongoing. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a gentleman with us here tonight, Mr. Gaskin, who has held the government portfolio as Minister of Business and has later on head of a strange portfolio, in my view, called Manufacturing and Marketing. But who, for those of us who know him, is one of the level heads who represents astute and pragmatic thinking, a rare breed, if I may so state. He has been an entrepreneur and an active investor in the private sector. Mr. Director, Mr. Gaskin, welcome to this Globespan platform and program.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahadeo, and good evening to all your viewers and listeners, wherever you might be. And thank you also to Globespan for hosting this program this evening. It's a pleasure to be here. I must say I enjoyed your opening remarks, very thought-provoking, cynical yet optimistic. But I must say that, politics in Guyana is no different from anywhere else in the world. And I might be playing devil's advocate here, but I do think that most politicians actually want to succeed in either delivering change or delivering something to the countries or the cities or the municipalities or regions that they are attempting to govern. The problem comes in getting to that point where you can actually be in the governing seat. For that, you need to compete. And that competition can sometimes be intense. And this is indeed the silly season, as we call it down here. But our campaign is, is going well. We're getting a good response. It's a nationwide campaign, and I think we have gotten, we're getting good feedback from all regions of Guyana. As you know, I'm with the APNU plus AFC coalition party, and we are seeking a second term in office. I'm on your program tonight to speak with you and your audience about whatever concerns you, whatever you wish to discuss. I'm at your disposal.
Thank you. So it goes without saying that you are fully supportive of the APNU AFC slate for the upcoming elections. And if you don't mind me asking, what role does Mr. Gaskin play currently in the campaign and in the strategies for the elections?
I am, as you know, a member of the AFC, which is one party to the coalition. My role in the AFC, I'm the party treasurer. I'm a member of the national executive. As far as the campaign structure is concerned, I fit in two places. One on the financing part, and the other, I am part of the Manifesto committee. So that's my role, more or less. I've been out and about lots of evenings, speaking at public meetings and doing whatever else I can to promote our coalition.
Right. So, Mr. Gaskin, pre-2015, you were an active and vociferous party wanting to get into power. And you and other persons, especially from within the AFC, you would have criticized the use of state funds and state assets in the then PPP electioneering. What is your current position?
My current position is that I am not using state assets for what I do in the campaign. I go to meetings in my vehicle, which I own, with my gas. I purchase my own meals. So I'm not using state assets to campaign. I also know that we are paying a lot for the various aspects of the campaign. We have to raise funds and we have to pay for our campaigning. So when you say the use of state assets, if you're speaking about ministers who have to go campaigning, I think it's normal. I believe it happens in most jurisdictions. If you are a president or a prime minister or a minister, you have, I guess, a vehicle at your disposal. You have a driver, and basically you don't drive yourself anywhere. And so those things happen in campaign season. It is not new. It certainly isn't new to the to this particular government. It's happened before. I think the problem comes in when you start to literally turn the apparatus of the state into a campaign machinery. I am not seeing that happening at this point, but I take your point. If things could go things could be a lot better. I would like to live in a country where the party apparatus is completely divorced from the assets of the state and the state apparatus when it comes to campaigning. I don't think we're there as yet, but I think we're getting there. It's a work in progress. I think a lot has been done to raise public awareness of the line that is drawn between the state and the government and the political parties. So it's a long journey, and we're getting there.
Right, because one has to be. I mean, from a private, non-political perspective, I'm not on any political platform, but there are many like me, and we're all concerned at the use of state media, at the use of. I mean, the meetings you guys attend and you speak at, you're using our taxpayers' money to advertise them. You're using our money. These are the non-political people to create a platform. And I get you. It happens in many jurisdictions, but there has to be a change. Now, let's look at last.
Can I just interrupt you? I'm sorry, but the meetings that we attend and we speak at, those are funded by us. We go to a particular location. I've been working a lot along the East Bank.
I was talking more about, for example, the offices of the DPI and those persons that are engaged on a full advertising campaign for elections. I was talking, for example, Chronicle on nomination day, the entire flag masthead of Chronicle changed to a party color. So those things, I believe, makes us, from a private perspective, frown at what's really happening in our country. And yes, we all must improve and hope to improve.
Yeah. No, the point is taken. I also would like to see us get to a point where things like that no longer happen. I think culturally we are still prone to this winner takes all syndrome, where once you're in government, you control the entire state apparatus. But I think, the public has to also drive change. It can't rely on government to say, oops, I must not do this anymore. I think public pressure and public awareness is an important factor in moving things along and getting us to the point that you and I probably would agree we would like to see this country be at.
But as we're speaking of state media, pre-2015, I think the AFC would have promised that when it gets into power, there were stern and firm decisions that would be taken about the use of the Guyana Chronicle or the privatization. I think a lot of people expected that the state media would have been privatized. I have scoured your manifesto to see whether there is any whisper of an intent of what you plan to do if you retain power with Chronicle and NCN, but there is nothing.
You're correct, there is nothing. I was part of the manifesto committee and nothing concerning the state media actually came up. So we are where we are now. But like I said, change doesn't only have to be driven by government. There is civil society, and there's a population, and there's public awareness and public pressure. And if it is felt that state media should be privatized or that state media should operate in a certain way, then that needs to be, the government needs to be made known to the powers that be.
So I'm going to hold you to that, because if the APNU AFC government wins, I'm going to give you probably 100 days in office, and then I'm going to publicly come out and start protesting in front of the state media and ask you to take action about state media, because we don't want the next election season to actually have the same discussion again, do we? Anyway, I don't want to put you on the spot. Good. Now, let me ask you, might be a strange question to ask, but I'm looking for an eagle's eye view. What is probably the unique thing about your manifesto that your political grouping believe that puts you head and shoulders above the PPPC or anybody else?
Our manifesto is attainable and it is achievable. And it actually consists mostly of programs that are either already in train or have already begun or have been carefully thought out. So it is not a wish list. A lot of political manifestos, especially from opposition camps, for perhaps good reason, tend to be wish lists. or promises. Our manifesto really builds on current programs or is extracted from the recommendations in the Green State Development Strategy. So there is a sort of a back end to our manifesto. And I think it is, for me, I am very confident that our manifesto is a commitment and that it is everything that we say in the manifesto is achievable and will be achieved. I mean, here's a caveat: you can never achieve 100% of what you set out to achieve. There will always be hurdles in the way. But certainly, I think, 95% of what's in our manifesto will be achieved, and what is not achieved is going to be achieved in another term, post 2025, if or when we win again.
All right. Now, as you know, this election, there are a host of newer parties that would have emerged. We have had a history of new parties emerging on the scene, election after election, but this time we have seen some new things come up. What's your view? Is your slate bothered with the numbers of new parties, and do you feel they would have an impact on your electorate, the people who would vote for you?
Well, not at all. We're not bothered. I think it's a good thing. I think it speaks to greater awareness of the electoral process and of the opportunities to gain office or seek office or even to get into parliament and try somehow to drive change through the parliamentary process. A lot of the smaller parties are hoping somehow that neither the coalition or the PPP will win a majority.
Well, they want to do what you did in 2011, right? They want to do what you did.
Yes, I'm sure they do. And, I don't have a problem with those ambitions. Of course, this is a hotly contested election, and we are contesting the election. So you mentioned earlier the gloves are off. Their gloves are off, our gloves are off. We're not punching particularly at the smaller parties because, we have been there. And we're not particularly concerned about them, let's say, eating into our support base. Even if I speak as a member of the AFC, which is the smaller party within the coalition that has, in the last 3 elections, gone after and attracted what we call the swing vote in Guyana, those who are not tied to either the PNC or the PPP. And I think that is the demographic that the smaller parties are going after, which one might argue might be the AFC constituency. But again, we are not bothered because I know what it took to get the AFC to the stage that it is at now. And I will tell you, it is not an easy task to contest elections in all 10 regions of Guyana. We were very fortunate to have the leadership of Minister Ramjitan, Minister Trotman, Ms. Sheila Holder at the time, who were very astute, politically astute, and who understood what it took to actually create a party. Without taking anything away from the smaller parties, I don't think any of them actually are, first of all, they're not competing in the entire country, in all 10 regions. And I don't think they have what it takes to really develop a structure throughout Guyana. Mm-hmm. That doesn't disqualify them in any way. They've all submitted a list of candidates on nomination day and are, they're in the game. And I won't go so far as to say I wish them well, but I wish them no harm, and I hope that they learn good lessons from this campaign.
Right. So, thank you for that. You did say that, we know that you are from the AFC faction or the AFC party of the coalition. It is widely believed, Mr. Gaskin, that the AFC has a reduced role in the next government if the APNU AFC slate wins. Does it mean that the AFC has lost in totality, its power or its ability to broker deals for itself. I mean, you didn't do well at the last LGE, and it's evident that the new agreement with the PNC or with APNU positions you as much smaller than you were in 2015.
I won't use the term much smaller. For instance, in 2015, we had 12 parliamentary seats. There was no percentage tied to that. That was a flat rate, more or less. That was what we negotiated for 12 parliamentary seats, which works out to about 36%, somewhere around there, of the 33 seats. This time around, we are saying 30%. If were we to get, let's say, 36 parliamentary seats, for instance, we would be back up to the 12 seats, or maybe 11. So it is not much smaller. With the same 33 seats, we get 10 seats. So it is a reduction. And the same goes for the ministerial positions. Mm-hmm. We have agreed to 5 ministerial positions. But we also have extended the 30%, 70% ratio now to regional democratic councils, which was not included in our original Cummings-Burger Accord. So right. I think it's a bit of give and take. I think we, as AFC, we are committed to coalition politics. And, in a negotiation, you have to be willing to negotiate. And we were willing to negotiate. We didn't go in there saying that this is it, take it or leave it. We did have a few non-negotiables, but at the same time, I think we were keen to continue the work of the coalition for at least another term.
So let me ask this question of you as Mr. Gaskin, the businessman. If the APNU AFC loses power, would Mr. Gaskin want to focus on opposition, or would it want to support a national call for national governance of this country?
When we first signed the Cummings-Burger Accord in 2015, we did speak of national unity. And this is something that we are committed to. Unfortunately, no one has been able to come up with a model that is achievable, workable, functional. That process to develop such a model has not begun. No one seems to own it. But I would be very interested in hearing from someone, let's say, with skin in the game, about the concept of a model that can work. And when we speak about national unity, I don't believe in fairy tales, and I don't like to fantasize. But what concerns me the most about our political system is the idea that a large segment of our electorate feels unrepresented after every national election. And I think that's a shame. I think that is something that we need to fix. We as a nation, no one party can fix it. Right. I think there needs to be some working together to fix that.
But on that exact point, don't you think that the APNU AFC government had the world of opportunity to employ and appoint people that are, you don't have to be party members, you don't have to be of a particular race. They could have embraced all of them, but they didn't.
I'm not sure. Well, I can speak for, let's say, my situation. I don't generally get involved in employment, but certainly in the agencies or wherever I had the opportunity to employ heads of agencies or even to appoint boards, I didn't make any political who had the necessary qualifications. I looked at boards from a point of view of getting a balance. Most state boards have stipulated compositions, a member of this agency, a member of that agency, and then you may have about 3 or 4 positions that you have the discretion to appoint. When it comes to hiring heads of agencies, I insisted on a process in all of our agencies that was based on merit, and I'm satisfied that the selections that came out of those processes were were non-political, certainly not political. And you can ask anyone in my ministry. But if we want to extend that now to other agencies, sometimes you might have to call names, because certainly if we look at GRA, which is a very important agency, the head of GRA, not politically partisan in any way. I can tell you
politically appointed, right?
Well, when you say politically appointed, what does that mean? I mean, the ministers or the board of directors
cabinet has a final say on those who are appointed to head any of these agencies. Cabinet has a veto on any recommendation you might make as a minister to cabinet to head any one of these boards. So at the end of the day, it becomes political. Because if you can't play the tune that is needed, or you wouldn't be perceived to be playing the tune that's needed, you wouldn't be appointed.
In my 4 years, or almost 4 years in cabinet, I have never seen that veto exercise in the appointment of any agency heads. And I'm trying to think through. I may have missed something, but I certainly don't recall that.
Okay.
Usually they come to cabinet simply for a no objection, or in case someone might know something that did not come out, let's say, in the interview, because Guyana is a small society and people can
Correct.
A lot of people do have checkered pasts. A lot of people may be unsuitable for certain positions. So it is in that context that these things do come to cabinet for a no objection, but it's the boards that have the authority to make the appointments.
But your Minister of Health made some public statements about wanting persons of a particular persuasion. So, and I didn't see any statement, from the head of state or things like that to really correct those notions. I believe those were missed opportunities. Now, in terms of the performance of the APNU AFC government and vis-a-vis the manifesto, the corruption, the whole aspect of corruption has become a big thing, not just in Guyana, the world over. How do you see corruption as something that your government can safely handle? I cannot boast of your handling of it in the past, almost 5 years.
Yes, we have not eradicated corruption, but I think we all know that fighting corruption is about strengthening institutions. It's about having strong institutions and systems in place. And that is something that we have been doing. We have established or appointed the Integrity Commission, and no one can argue that
you're not complying with it yourselves. I mean, the government isn't in compliance.
And that's why I said fighting corruption really depends on strong institutions and independent institutions. Now, people don't recognize this for what it is, but I think it's a tremendous stride in the right direction when an Integrity Commission in Guyana can publish names of government officials who have not filed their returns on time. Now, that would not have happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It is happening today. These might be small steps, but the institutions and their independence are critical to the fight against corruption.
But I'll tell you how the public looks at your handling of corruption. Has any person, has any head, has any minister been held accountable I mean, you hear and you know of all these things that, ministers have their spouses in charge of half of a contract and things like this. And you hear of I mean, Durban Park issue, Auditor General report, you hear of all these things, but nobody, Mr. Granger has not publicly said, you know what, Mr. Gaskin, I don't want you in my government. And I'm not saying you, I'm just using sorry, that was a bad use of instead.
I mean, you're asking me to comment on perhaps the president's style of leadership, which I'm not prepared to do. Every leader has their own style. We see over in the USA, President Trump has a style that is very different to many of his predecessors. But in terms of corruption, we have moved significantly on the Corruption Perception Index, which is a global index. We've moved from 124th out of 175 countries in 2014 to the most recent report where we were 85th out of 180 countries. That is significant progress. It has to mean something. I would be the last person to sit here and tell you that corruption has been eradicated or anything like that. It still exists. But, there are ways of dealing with it, and I believe strong institutions is the first step, strengthening our institutions. We have appointed the Public Procurement Commission, and that completely removes the role of cabinet in the approval of contracts.
But then how come the answer, McCall, is it answer? How come that drug procurement fiasco happened then? I mean, those are the things. We have had shortages of drugs in the system. We have had contracts. I mean, so I'm not saying that your government probably is guilty or not guilty. What I'm saying is that I've had other guests on the show, Mr. Gaskin, from the APNU AFC party, right? And up to today, I've seen on media, government seems to always excuse itself. Well, look at what Jagdeo did, or look at what the PPP did, look at what happened there. That's why you're in power. And should be held to a higher standard.
Yes, we should be held to a higher standard. I know the expectation was that we would operate at a higher standard. Zero tolerance on corruption. It's something that I think is very important for not just for our government, but for Guyana. I believe that when you inherit a government when you come after a government that has been in office for a long period of time, it is quite difficult to establish a strong hold on especially procurement and a lot of things that take place. There's a lot going on that you really don't have a good handle on. Corruption is almost endemic. And as you know, procurement is a major avenue for corruption in most countries in the world. And Guyana is certainly no different. And there are all sorts of tricks that play out. There are all sorts of circumvention of the system when it comes to procurement. And certainly there still is malpractice. But before action is taken, I believe it's important that there are proper investigations and that there is a system that is robust enough to mitigate corruption in the first instance, and also to get the kind of evidence that is required if you want to make convictions, or if you even want to fire people. It's difficult to fire people in the public service. I mean, that is a whole different story you're getting into. Firing
you had a minister come in and fire everybody on the spot, right? So, but don't worry. I mean, I'm just being facetious there.
But I think you will see a stronger approach to corruption in a second term in office. I can almost assure you of that, because it is something that we are aware of. It is an area that causes a lot of discussion even within our party. And I think you can look forward, or the Guyanese public can look forward to a much stronger effort against corruption in a second term of an APNU plus AFC government.
Mhm. I have an interesting question for you that just came in from a viewer, Javed Khan. Um, he said, you asked Mr. Gaskin, if you were the president, would you, as president, would you have accepted that no confidence motion that your government got defeated by that NCM and accept the traditional 33 majority in a 65 seat parliament? I mean, it's people are still carrying this on their shoulders. So let me ask it of you. Your comment.
I think you have to look at it from 2 points of view, or maybe even 3. The first thing is that on the night of the no confidence motion, we did accept it, that this motion was passed. Subsequent to that, legal advice was received, and I don't think any government and any business can't ignore legal advice. If there's a legal opinion that says, hold on a second, this thing is not validly passed because of X, Y, Z, I think you have a duty to your constituents or the electorate to pause and listen to that advice or heed that advice. And I think that is what happened. I think we made it very clear that, we have legal advice that says that this motion was not passed by the correct amount of votes, and we will move towards the court. And that's what we did. I think we respected the final decision of the court, but we exhausted the entire process, which I think is, once you go through that process, you need to exhaust it. You don't just give up at the first stage. If you're asking me personally whether I believe 33 is a majority of 65, I do, but I'm not a lawyer, and I am not going to argue against lawyers who say, look, we have a case and we don't feel that 33 is an absolute majority. So, everybody does it. Everybody goes to court. You have a number of cases, whether it's criminal cases or civil cases, where it seems cut and dried, but it still ends up in court with strange arguments. Sometimes they win, sometimes they lose. That is what the legal system is there for, and I think we used a legal mechanism to fight a case that we were advised was not as cut and dried as it appeared.
Okay. Well, thank you for that answer. Let's proceed on a short commercial break, and we'll be back in a couple of seconds. Devin?
January marks 1 year since Globespan 24x7 embarked on this initiative to offer a platform that brings in all sides, all points of view, and all concerns. Viewers in Guyana and across the world are participating in discussions that are bringing to light issues relating to social, economic, and political matters that have been plaguing our nation. Globespan's platform offers Guyanese to express their concerns and discuss solutions in the political realm, thereby addressing the polarized situation. Discussions also include social ills, such as alcoholism, domestic violence, and suicides that have been plaguing the people. The platform also mitigates the brain drain by having speakers that live in Guyana and across the world participate in these discussions. This concept will avail a broader view for the benefit of all Guyanese, so Globespan needs your support to offset the expenses. Kindly contribute by clicking the link in the description to help support these programs. After one time is another time. Now Guyana has choices. Choose between American Airlines, Caribbean Airlines, or JetBlue with non-stop and direct flights to Guyana. Check out these low fares. From New York to Guyana, fares start from $209 one-way, $462 round-trip. From Miami to Guyana, from $205 one-way, $448 round-trip. From Orlando to Guyana, from $271 one-way, $591 round-trip. From Atlanta to Guyana, from $271 one-way, $591 round-trip. From Houston to Guyana, from $372 one-way and $751 round-trip. From Toronto to Guyana, $272 one-way and $486 round-trip. These are non-stop and direct flights with all taxes included. Call TravelSpan and choose your airline with low fares. Call TravelSpan now In USA, call 718-845-0437. In Canada, call 647-557-6200. That's USA, call 718-845-0437. And in Canada, call 647-557-6200. Or book online at travelspan.com. Travelspan, serving the community for over 26 years.
Thank you, and we're back live. We are here tonight with Mr. Dominic Gaskin, who a former minister within the APNU AFC government, current director of manufacturing and marketing, having an interesting discussion on a number of things, politics. Mr. Gaskin, the slate that the APNU AFC party ticket has going into government, do you feel that that slate is probably the best that can win you the elections? And the main part of that question is, it's a norm in politics that everybody within that slate, well, depending on the number of seats you have, but most people would expect a high-ranking job somewhere. The question for you is, will your government consider focusing on employing professionals, or will it continue to employ more of supporters and party loyalists? And this is coming from a viewer.
Okay, that's a bit of a loaded question. We have employed a number of professionals in our current government. Going forward, the persons who are on the slate, the candidates, they are there potentially as parliamentarians or government ministers. And should we win the election, the leaders of the respective parties will extract the names of, I guess, the winning team to represent the coalition in parliament, and from those parliamentarians will extract a number of ministers to fill the various ministries based on number of considerations. The remaining candidates are not guaranteed government jobs. Unfortunately, that's not how the system was designed to work, and that is not my expectation of how it will work. So I think the premise is slightly incorrect. Not all candidates will be selected, and certainly those who are not selected are not they're not first in line for any government job. I don't think we will hold it against them if they were to apply for a government job for which they are qualified, and if they go through a process that a process that is fair. I don't think that I don't have a problem with that. I don't think being a candidate for any political party should disqualify you from working for the government. But I don't believe in political appointees for public service positions or for government positions. That's not my style. I don't like it. I don't think it does this country any good.
Let's talk a little bit about oil, and put on your cap as a businessman, and a politician, of course, which I guess you can't take off. Oil. All of the newer parties that have come on our platform has basically agreed to one chorus, and that is the oil contracts should be renegotiated. I have not seen any such sentiment in the APNU AFC manifesto. What's the position? One of your supporters, Mr. I can't remember his name now. We had him on a program a little while back, and he said it's a done deal, and you already got a deal, and there is no contemplation of any renegotiation. It is what it is. Take it and move on.
And that's pretty much an accurate reflection of where the matter stands. But I want to say something, and it's if it wasn't so serious a matter, it might be amusing. But this is a classic case of a few people saying that something is a bad deal, and they say it often enough and repeat it often enough, and everyone then agrees that it's a bad deal. And a lot of people, I would say 99% of the people I speak with and who are concerned about the oil contract haven't read it. They're relying solely on a small handful of either activists or reporters, or, it's a small handful of persons who seem to have taken on this very radical approach to the oil and gas sector, or to Exxon and its partners, or to the contract, with varying levels, varying degrees of intensity. But it has been very intense and very repetitious. I mean, over the last 3 years or so, or maybe two years, 2.5 years, we have heard repeatedly the same arguments over and over and over again. And I must say this on this program. They are being very selective in how they describe the contract, and how they report on the contract, and on everything. And let me just set the record straight on a number of things. First of all, and I've said this before, I'm not saying that this is the best contract or the best deal in the world. I'm not saying that. But there is nothing scandalous, or there is nothing terrible about this contract. I think what has happened is that, first of all, we keep hearing about 2%. And everybody's talking about the 2% royalty that we're getting. And they're comparing it to Ghana, which is getting, I think, a 10% in its latest deal. They're comparing it with Suriname, which is getting 6.25%. But then they are completely ignoring the fact that the 2% is just the royalty. The bulk of our oil revenues will come from the 50% production share or profit share, which works out to 12.5%, or a minimum of 12.5% of the total value of production in any 1 year. So you take the 2% off the gross, and then you add that 12.5%. So the very minimum that the Guyana government will get in oil revenue in any 1 year is 14.5%. Now that will increase as once the company recovers its initial investment and development costs. So the exploration and development costs that it has been expended over the years, when that is recovered in 4 to 5 years, that 14.5% will increase to 20, 25, 30% of the total value of oil production. Now we're talking about significant revenues, and to have an entire nation being misled into believing that we are not getting anything out of this deal, I think that is scandalous to me. And I want to say something else about it, because when that contract was signed and negotiated and signed, a number of things were happening. First of all, there'd only been one discovery. Right now, we're excited. We're over the moon. We've had 16 successful discoveries, almost unprecedented anywhere else in the world. And we're now looking back with the benefit of this knowledge and this good news, and we want to rewrite history. But at the time, there was only one successful discovery. And what's worse is that at the time, the ExxonMobil contract, their exploration license was about to expire. And it could not have been renewed because it had already been renewed twice, and that is the maximum amount of times it can be renewed. So illegal, legitimate mechanism was found to grant ExxonMobil a new exploration license. Had that not been done, we would not have had the 16 discoveries today. There are a lot of things that are not known or are not spoken about the oil contract or about the oil and gas sector that I think people should know. A week after the discovery was announced in 2015, the Venezuelan president decreed an entire, maybe about 3/4 of Guyana's territorial waters as Venezuelan waters, called it the Atlantic coast of Venezuela. That happened a week after the discovery of the oil was announced back in May of 2015. That is what our government was contending with. One, discovery, promising discovery, an aggressive neighbor flexing its muscle, and a decision to be made. What do you do? Do you grant the company a new exploration license so that they can continue exploring for perhaps another 10 years?
Right.
Do you sign a contract with them? Because we did insist, or we did request, that we go from discovery to production as quickly as possible. Those were imperatives for us, given the aggressiveness of Venezuela at the time, and given the potential for them to actually chase away Exxon from there. And this has happened before.
So a couple of questions on it. One is, are you saying that the entire Kaichur News expose is completely wrong? They've gotten it totally wrong. Two, if government felt that its back was against the wall, so to speak, at the time when it entered into these contracts, why not want to relook at it now? And the third one is that you have said that you're getting this fabulous percentage, but isn't it out of profit? And the people are not paying any taxes. And you, as a businessman, profit is a book figure. It's made up or made down anyhow, how you want.
No, there are two things. Historically, there have been two types of oil contracts or petroleum contracts. There is a royalty and tax contract, which I think was the original type, and then there's a royalty and production sharing agreement, and they are sort of distinct. There are now many hybrid versions, but originally, those were the two types of contract. So what we have is a production sharing agreement. Generally, those have a small royalty and a production share and no taxation. That's just how the industry operates. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't add a tax to it. That can be done. But if you're going to take 50% of the profit, 2% royalty, and then you're going to turn around and tax them, you might find that you might not have any persons interested in exploring for oil in your country.
No, but I don't agree with you that you won't have persons interested in exploring oil. I mean, look, another facet of the discussion is in terms of the burning of the natural gas. 3,000 cubic feet that's just been burned. I mean, even Russia, we could have learned from the rest of the countries. Even Russia has in its contract clauses that forces the oil company to ensure they tap the gas rather than just get rid of it.
Well, those are active discussions that are on the way. We have,
But you said you guys are not going to renegotiate. You're not relooking at the contract.
No, that has nothing to do with the flaring of the gas. The gas is generally re-injected to maintain the pressure in the well. Now, there is about 30 to 50 million cubic feet per day that is available from that associated gas that will be piped to shore and that can be used to generate electricity. Those discussions are currently on the way, and my understanding is that there is enough gas from the first project, the Liso 1 project, to power the whole of Guyana, or the national grid. And that is something that is actively being pursued by our government. But that is not a limitation on the contract. The issue with the contract or the flaring of the gas, that is an environmental issue, and our government is not happy with flaring. We don't want them to flare the gas. We want them to bring it on shore, or we want to find a way to get that gas on shore and utilize it, or they re-inject it. Just another point, though, on the issue of profit. When we say profit oil, I mentioned earlier that profit oil or recoverable expenses are capped. So in no year can the oil company say to the government that we didn't make a profit, so you're not getting your production share. There's a cap on what they can recover, and that's why I said the very minimum that we can recover in any 1 year is 12.5%.
Okay.
Now, 2%, regardless of whether they make a profit or not. So it's not one of those contracts like we had with some of the bauxite companies or other extractive sector companies, where we had a stake in the venture, but we never actually got any money because they never declared a profit. That cannot happen in this case.
Okay. As you know, you've had a number of experts that would have been part of your government that has come out to criticize government's handling of some of these contracts. I take your point. You totally disagree with them. And I would presume that the government's position or the APNU AFC slate's position going into the elections is that the contracts are sacrosanct and there is nothing that you plan to do that would affect any of the economic values of the contract, right?
Correct. I mean, there are areas where, and I think we have made some progress when it comes to, let's say, the GRA or the EPA and how they deal with the contractor and their subcontractors and certain activities that they're carrying out. So those, I think we have strong heads of both agencies who understand what they need to do and who are not timid when it comes to dealing with oil companies. And they've made progress in not negotiating, but in reaching some acceptable positions in their sectors. And I think we'll see a lot of that going forward, for instance, with local content and many other areas. But in terms of the 2% and the 50% production share, no, I don't see a renegotiation happening. There are, that is not the only petroleum block. We have a number of other petroleum blocks. We have some unallocated blocks, and the government, it is in our manifesto, we're looking at a new production share model, a template, and that is going to have much more lucrative terms for our government. Now that whole basin has been de-risked and there's all the interest in it, yes, we can demand a lot more.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier that persons should acquaint themselves. Two of our viewers would have inboxed to ask if they can be educated now or later as to where they can get a copy of those documents that they could read and study, so that they're not, as you say, taken in by the public perception out there. But would you know if the contracts in any way would have been released into public for public consumption?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the contract itself, there was a big fiasco about government not releasing the contract. But that contract, from the time it was signed, was lodged at the Deeds and Commercials Registry as a public document where for a fee it could have been accessed. And it still can be. But I believe the document can be found online. It's my copy, I'm sure I got it online. It can be found online. Just search it and you'll find it somewhere.
Yes, and I'm sure the agency that is in charge of the EPA and the other agencies in charge of the environmental local content management, I believe their website also has it. I saw it there the other day. Well, at least has a couple pages of some of the contracts. Mr. Gaskin, I want to move back to the local politics, and it is something that has irritated a lot of Guyanese. Pre-2015, when you were in opposition, your team were vociferous, coming out against government entering into contracts days and weeks leading up to the election. This government is guilty of the same. What has changed? Why is there this really 360 degrees turnaround?
When you say entering into contracts, if you're speaking about contracts that were signed last year or contracts that were signed, I mean, you have to be a little more specific because I don't want to misquote you. But what I will say is that I know there were 2 contracts for schools signed recently. In January. I don't know of any other major contracts. But it is not the government that signs the contract. It's not ministers who sign contracts. It is PSs that sign contracts in government. And, government's work has to continue whether or not there are elections. I think the problem arises when there's a new project, a brand new project that was not in any budget or was not, being developed before, or maybe that was controversial, and all of a sudden it is signed a week before elections. Like the contract to build the Marriott was signed in 2011. I think literally less than 2 weeks before the election, and this is a contract for.
But you have done the same.
We haven't signed it.
You have done the same. You have given away land at Ogo that is, I believe, worth far more than 52 million to build another Marriott. I mean, the public is not aware of the full details of some of these deals. But back to your question.
You're saying the land is worth far more than 52 million, but they have a valuation. I can't argue with the valuation, but they do have a valuation. And my understanding is that, and it's a public knowledge, that the land was sold at $26 million per acre for a specific purpose. And that purpose was to develop a Marriott branded hotel. And I think that is a good thing. We need additional capacity. We don't have enough hotel rooms. Why wouldn't the government, or why wouldn't...
But I wish I could find a clip of you and your colleagues in 2015, because the then government was saying these exact words. We need capacity. We need these things happening. And you were opposing it because the timing of it is perception, as you know, means a lot.
Yeah, but the model is different. When they wanted to build a Marriott, or when they wanted to have a Marriott, what did they do? They took money that they got from selling, I think, government shares in GT&T. They borrowed money from Republic Bank. I think it was a syndicated loan for $27 million US. They lent the company that they set up another $15.5 million US. And they basically spent $50-something million of government money on building this hotel. And that cost doesn't include a lot of other costs that I think add up to close to $90 million US. Our approach is a little different. We sold them land for $26 million an acre to a private investor who will build a hotel.
But hold on.
We're not taking government's money and playing around with government's money.
No, but of course, I mean, the land doesn't belong to the government. The land belongs to the people of Guyana.
Right.
But there is an inbox message here that I must read to you. That says that the valuation you have of the $26 million per acre is a pre-2015 valuation. So you've used all valuation to sell land on a current valuation, on a current pricing.
I'm not aware of the details, but I don't have a problem. I don't think our government has a problem if somebody wants to investigate and pursue that angle. I have no problem with that, because we are championing transparency. We want transparency. This, to my understanding, was a transparent deal. If there's anything that is not clear or not transparent, please bring it to light. I don't have a problem with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm sorry, people are sending, I would like to urge viewers, please post it on our Facebook page. But I have a clip here that says Government of Guyana in January signed procurement of food and processing equipment for industrial incubator at Belvedere Berbice, contract for procurement of vaccine and syringes, which is fine, the health has to go on, contract for emergency works at Hope, East Coast. I mean, some of these things I would not pay heed to because, of course, sea defense and other stuff has to go on. But there are some cases, I think 50 contracts that would have been approved by the government or maybe it's under that, but from the date of announcing elections to now. And I find that very strange. What are your thoughts?
Well, I know a lot of what was approved would have been passed in the 2019 budget, which was passed back in December of 2018. So I don't have a problem with spending money before elections that was budgeted, because the same National Assembly that passed the no confidence motion is the same National Assembly that passed the budget.
But so, Mr. Gaskin, if you were in opposition today, what would you say and what would you think and say? You wouldn't be saying this.
No, I would be, because when our objection to the Marriott, and you can go back and listen to recordings, at least me, because I know that our objection had to do with the model, the way it was conceived, the fact that it was supposed to be a public-private partnership and there was no private partner, the fact that it was highly leveraged and that they were selling a 2/3 stake in the venture for only $8 million US after government had borrowed 27 million and lent them an additional 50 million. So those are the objections that we had when it came to the Marriott. I don't think it had to do with the spending of money that was budgeted for the particular for any particular expenditure. And you mentioned the business incubator. I know that was in last year's budget. It was budgeted for and approved.
What would it have hurt your government to put a stay on some of these things for a month? Because the public perception is that something is wrong with this picture.
I think we should look at what other governments do, because I don't see the USA or the UK government grinding to a halt every time there's an election. I think once they have...
I don't think in any way
new projects. You know, new projects is where the problem comes in, or projects that are contentious. That is where the problem. I don't think that any member of the public wants to see government stop spending money. That hurts your economy. That's not good for Guyana to just stop spending money because you have an election coming. But certainly not to start any new projects. And I don't know that we've started any new projects.
You see, here is a problem that we have. When in opposition, the current government persons and personnel had a particular position against government spending, regardless of what it was. When in government, it's okay. If you guys are in opposition the next round, how can we, the electorate, now listen to your battle call? Then the other thing I'm concerned about is of greater concern is the precedence that is being set. Now, if you in 2015 had 2011 had gotten through with your no confidence motion, 2014 thereabouts, had gotten through with your no confidence motion using a 33/65, it would have been okay. But thereafter, now, in the future, sorry to be a long-winded question, but even if another government decide to use your actions as precedents in opposition, you would be in a terribly disadvantaged position, won't you?
Well, the 34 issue has been settled by the Caribbean Court of Justice, so that's good. And a number of other related issues have been settled, so that is actually good. I think it was good that the public had some education on the matter. Even the issue of dual citizenship, well, that hasn't been settled at the CCJ level, but certainly it has been made a lot clearer than it was in the Constitution, where the language did not lead me, for instance, to believe that I was in any way in violation of the Constitution as a member of Parliament. But subsequently, I listened to the Chief Justice's ruling, and her interpretation was very different from my own. I accept the ruling of the Chief Justice, but I'm just saying that these matters going to court, these constitutional matters getting clarified by the court is not necessarily a bad thing, because they set a precedent. So no one is going to come ever again with the 33 argument. At least I hope not. The dual citizenship may not come back. But to your wider point about being in opposition, politics in Guyana is not, there's a term that is used sometimes, the dumbing down of things, where, you reduce every discussion to a very low level and you don't really lift the conversation or lift the discussion to the level that I think an educated society or informed society would want to have. And that is unfortunate, but that is a reality of perhaps where we are.
Yeah, at election time, it's all about emotions.
Pardon?
At election times, it's all about emotions and perception. So lifting the debate at election time, you got to use your 4 years in power to do that.
Yeah, but I think, the public being informed is important. I would prefer to to be part of a society where the public could not be so easily misled. But I think that, is a work in progress, like I said. And we'll get there at some point. Education is a key pillar of our APNU plus AFC manifesto. We are committed to an education nation, and hopefully with an education nation comes a lot of benefits, including greater political awareness and perhaps more political astuteness.
Right. Now, one of the good things I saw, coming back to your previous portfolio of business, one of the good things I saw in your manifesto was ensuring the populace of a 20% allocation, of government purchases that will go to empower small businesses. In other words, you're shifting business to the smaller players in the marketplace. Tell us a little bit more about this.
Yeah, well, that's actually a provision in the Small Business Act of 2004 that was never really implemented. We made a commitment, and I, as minister responsible for the Small Business Bureau, made that commitment that, under our government, we will implement that provision. It is not as easy as it sounds, because in order to implement a 20% procurement program, you have to have a way of measuring procurement that goes to small businesses, which means that you have to have all the state agencies, including the regional democratic councils, on board with providing information that will allow you to make those assessments. So it took us a long time to work out between Ministry of Finance and NPTAB, at which point that data would be collected so we can know how far from the 20% are we. Are we exceeding it? Are we not exceeding it? Because unless you can measure it, you don't know how to target your interventions. We've come a long way with that. We've actually developed the program. It was supposed to have started in January 2019. But the problem was that there needed to be two amendments to the Public Procurement Act as well as amendments to the Small Business Act to facilitate it, because we had discussions with the Public Procurement Commission also, and there need to be some regulations to support it, which could not have been done following the no confidence motion, at least after the courts had started to rule. I think Parliament did not sit for a long time, and then Parliament decided it would not bring any new legislation. So our government decided we would not bring any new legislation to Parliament. So hopefully in the new term in government, we will get those legislative and regulatory hurdles behind us, and we can start to really implement this act. It's very important because it increases the impact of public spending. So not only do we get the goods or services that we are paying for, but we also get that money circulating among small businesses. We get to now develop our small business sector. And with what is happening in the oil and gas sector, there are going to be a lot of the bigger contractors are going to gravitate to oil and gas. So there will be room for small businesses to develop and evolve, over the years into larger businesses. And this particular program can assist them to do so.
Right. Well, certainly. I mean, I think programs like this can assist in a platform will assist in a great deal. But we don't stand a chance against NC. And we want to take a quick commercial break. And when we get back, I would want us to discuss a little bit of the part of their manifesto that looks at economic diversification. You spoke about in your manifesto, you're talking about public education and nutritional services and, allocation of land to farms and stuff like that. So let's go on a quick commercial break.
Looking for an embroidery service or advertising services? Look no further than Inspire Incorporated. Get your very own personalized items that include rubber stamps, ID cards, mouse pads, diaries, polos, office wear, and so much more. Create your own logo or messages on any substract. It's very quick and efficient. Call Inspire Incorporated today at 222-2042 or visit at 62 Area Q, Turkine, Guyana. Times are changing. There are more airlines operating to Guyana. Travelspan GT offices in Guyana have very low fares. Fares have never been so low from Guyana to New York. Choose from Caribbean Airlines, American Airlines, and others. Call TravelSpan GT for low fares and your choice of airlines. From Guyana to New York, fares start from $278. And from Guyana to Toronto, fares start from $354. And from Guyana to Trinidad, fares start from $174. Call TravelSpan GT for any destinations. In addition to low fares, TravelSpan GT has cruises, hotels, and tour packages to Europe, Dubai, India, Dominican Republic, and many more. Call our Georgetown office at 227-1701 or Rose Hall at 337-4287 or New Amsterdam at 333-6230. TravelSpan also has offices in New York, Trinidad, and Guyana. Again, call 227-1701. Travel plans, call TravelSpan.
Thank you, and we're back live. Former Minister Gaskin is our special guest tonight, and we're talking about politics in general, the APNU AFC plan for a second term in office if they're successful at the next poll. Gaskin, to tell us a little bit about the manifesto and your plans with regards to especially economic diversification. And I must note, I know that your government introduced a lot of taxes. I mean, you tax on data, on electricity for pensioners. Your government would have implemented a host of taxes in the last 5 years. I have not seen in the manifesto
that's not exactly
reduction. I have not seen in the manifesto any reduction of those taxes or removal of them. But over to you, sir. Tell us about economic diversification and tax incentives and all of that.
Well, let me just say that the issue of the 200 new taxes that the opposition has been accusing us of implementing is a total fabrication. We have not raised taxes. All we have done, we've actually reduced VAT, we've reduced income tax, we've reduced taxes on for manufacturers, we've reduced taxes for small businesses. What we did with the VAT is change the allocation or change some of the zero rated to exempt and exempt to zero rated. And I think with that, some items that were previously exempt or previously zero rated are now exempt, and little things like that. Yes, there's a tax on data and all of that, but it's the same VAT, which we reduced to 14%. And on the taxation issue, I must say that, if you repeat something often enough, it becomes the truth. And that's what we hear. This government has implemented 200 new taxes, but we've actually reduced taxes. If you earn $100,000 a month, you know what you pay in income tax? You pay $6,000 and maybe $500 in income tax if you earn $100,000 a month in Guyana. In 2014, if you were earning $100,000 a month in Guyana, you would have paid $14,000 in income tax. So we have not raised taxes. It is just that there were certain items that are now taxable or vatable, and I believe that that is causing some concern. I mean, I can't give you a list of the items, but certainly we have not raised taxes. But back to the economic diversification.
But baby pampers, I mean, to throw that in.
Yeah, I think the list of items that was moved from zero rated or to exempt or vice versa was a bit sweeping. But I don't think the government is unreasonable, because I know in particular with Minister Jordan and the VAT issue, he has made it very clear, especially to manufacturers. And so if there is a problem, if you feel that the tax, any of the new amendments or so are adversely affecting your business, come in and share your position with us, because we have gone back on like the VAT on education. We have done some workarounds for some of the other businesses, exporters that were affected by some of the exemptions. And we continue to do that, so we're not a heartless government.
But listen, I mean, from our perspective as people, we find it unfortunate when governments say If you have a problem, come to us. Come to who? Because the ministers and the people who matter are way in their daily run of the mill business. They're way above the ordinary folks. The only time we see you guys is election time. And this is not you, this is the opposition and everybody else. But you know, it has affected a lot of people. I mean, I throw it in as being facetious. Baby pampers, internet. I mean, all those things to be taxing. I think you hurt a lot of people hit a lot of people in the wrong place. But let's talk about the future.
You're not giving us credit for where we have reduced taxes, and I think it is unfair because we are labeled, and I think it's mislabeled, as a government that has just been increasing taxes. But if you look at what at the reductions in taxes, especially where it counts, and
but that's the thing, where it counts. It counts to tax the pension, to tax data, to tax medicines. I mean, that's where it counts.
I don't know that medicines are taxed. I don't know about that. My understanding is that medication is not taxed. But like I said, if things are repeated often enough, they suddenly become facts, and that is unfortunate. But in terms of the economic program and diversification, one of the we have a very good project that is going to be completed this year, and it's the development of a national export and investment strategy, and that is focusing. There are two consultancies involved, and they've already identified through consultations some priority sectors that we will be focusing on, such as agro-processing and aquaculture, tourism, mining, some of the high value-added services, forestry sectors, and so that is very exciting because it's difficult to say you're doing anything unless you have a plan, unless you have a strategy, unless you have very carefully thought out implementation plan. And this will give us a plan. How are we going to strengthen those sectors? And it's even more important because of the advent of oil, because I think we've made it very clear, and I think there's broad agreement on this. The oil is only going to last for about 40 years. So we have to use the oil to drive the kind of economic growth and development that will strengthen the more sustainable economic sectors.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what we have planned. So those sectors are very important. And when we speak about economic diversification, it is mostly in the export sectors, because that is where you want to diversify. You don't want all your eggs in one basket, sugar or gold or bauxite or even oil, because when those sectors go into decline, or when there's a price drop in the international market, it can throw your whole economy, in chaos. So that is sort of the thinking around those. But those, like I said, those are a lot of what is in our manifesto are programs that have already begun. Our infrastructure program, for instance, or whatever you see there, that is what is in train. When we speak about solar farms, these are not pie in the sky wish list type proposals. Studies have already been done. These things can start this year. Road to Lethem, for instance, all the hinterland roads, all those things can actually start immediately once we have the revenues. Once we have the money.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about gender equality, gender care, and the minority communities in an emerging Guyana. Is because I just received an inbox message from someone that says, does your manifesto include anything for the LGBTQ society, and is anything else going to be done to give them more of an equal platform in the community?
I think you might need to be specific, because I don't think we've singled out that particular community. However, we have made it clear that there will be no discrimination against that community. In fact, I think it was in our core principles when we signed between the AFC and the APNU. In our core principles, we made it very clear that as a government and as coalition partners, we will ensure that there is no discrimination against any Guyanese, and we listed, age, ethnicity, religion, um, sexual preferences, gender, and a number of areas. So
Okay.
we know for sure that we certainly are not against persons choosing their own lifestyles, and we certainly do not want to, we certainly will not be discriminating against that particular group. I
Right.
don't know necessarily we're saying to any one group that we have a special regime in place for you, but certainly we recognize that particular demographic as a very important demographic that we do not want to alienate,
Fair enough.
either in elections or as a government.
So you have in the manifesto a conditional cash transfer that you guys would have contemplated in putting it here. It's of course based on having a feasibility done. So it's not necessarily something that is written in stone that it's going to happen. It's based on the outcome of a feasibility study. But tell us a little bit more about your thinking of this cash transfer, and where is it going to come from? What's going to fund it?
Well, this was to have come, or is to come, from oil revenues. The idea behind it is quite simple, is that the oil that we are talking about and we are excited about belongs to all Guyanese. It's Guyanese oil. And every Guyanese must have the opportunity to benefit from Guyanese oil. Now, there's a lot of us will benefit. They say the rising tide lifts all boats. And most of us will benefit somehow or the other. If you have a business, there will be an increase in demand, and you will your business will have an opportunity to expand. If you are trained, you probably will get a better job that you can get today or could have gotten yesterday. So most of us will benefit, but there are some people, because of their, who won't be touched if we just leave this thing to its own devices. There's a segment of society that generally does not benefit, cannot benefit from a tax break, for instance, cannot benefit from job opportunities, the traditionally neglected segments of society. And I'm not speaking about any ethnicity or anything like that. I'm speaking about, pockets of people, maybe even certain communities that are disadvantaged because of their location, remote locations or whatever. But the idea is that those persons, we have to find a way to ensure that those persons benefit also. We can't say that because you choose to be, if you don't want to work, for instance, that you cannot get a share of the oil. You have a right as a Guyanese. So I think the issue of cash transfers came about. Dr. Clive Thomas did a paper on it. I don't think it's a question of a feasibility study to say whether or not it should be done. I think the question is a feasibility study to develop a model that can work for us. So I would almost want to put my head on a block and say, no, this is something that we are committed to. It's just a question of defining the model, and that's what the feasibility study will tell us.
Right. But in many countries, Trinidad and elsewhere, they have started they have a stringent methodology in place to limit the use of the reserve, to limit the use for projects that will be long term. As you rightly said, this oil is only going to last 40 years. It's now that we have to build this country for the next 100 years. So, if we allow you politicians, if we the people allow the politicians to really, really dip into those funds and spend it out willy-nilly, we're not going to have 100 years to be boasting of.
Well, I'm glad you raised that, because as you know, we passed a Natural Resources Fund Act last year, last January in Parliament. And that's another act. You can find it online. I really urge people to read it, because again, a few people have been bashing this act as if it's the worst ever happened. But that act is every single penny of oil revenues goes into the Natural Resources Fund. And it cannot come out without a very stringent process being followed. And the committees that are established to oversee those various processes, these are committees not just of government representatives or officials, but representation from the political opposition, the private sector, civil society, our regions. And even when money is finally withdrawn, it still has to go through into the consolidated fund and be appropriated in the National Assembly. So there's no way that any politician is going to get their hands on our oil revenues and spend it willy-nilly. I can assure you of that.
Okay. I guess we are going to see. We are almost down at program time. And there are a couple of areas I would have wanted to touch on, ICT, but more particularly, I want to touch on the moods going into the elections, because I've noted, I mean, coming back to the elections, out of the manifesto a little bit, because Mr. Gaskin, we have a care, not just for governance, but for the people. Unfortunately, I've preached this on every show to all the viewers out there, to all of Guyana. Vote, but don't hate. We have seen people and their emotions build up and up. And my fear is that unless you who want to be the leaders of Guyana can call on the population to be pragmatic, to be calm, to not attack each other's race and disposition, then we are not going to get a healthy post-election period. And that's my fear. Your thoughts, sir?
I don't share your concern. I don't think it is the ethnic factor is always there, because that is what is relied on, when we want to oppose whatever the outcome of the election is. But generally, I have always been prepared to accept the results of the elections. I have faith in the system. I have confidence in GCOM. I have confidence in the current chair of GCOM. And whatever the outcome of the election is, I will support it. And I believe the AFC is on record as saying this also. And I think generally the parties will have to accept it. I would like to see Guyana move to a stage where, after the elections, the party that doesn't win concedes the elections. Like in most other countries, our Caribbean brothers and sisters, they do it. In the United States, in many countries, even on election night, whoever doesn't win the election comes out and concedes the election.
Correct.
That is what is lacking. It is not an ethnic problem. It is just a refusal to accept the outcome of the process.
Absolutely.
And I have confidence in that process, and I would like to see that process respected, and I would like to see the nation itself confident in that process. Because if we cast aspersions on that particular process, we can never develop, as a democracy.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Gaskin, it's been a pleasure to have you tonight. I would like to ask you to, give us your parting comments while wishing you all the best for the coming weeks heading into election. But your final comments, sir, before we bring program to a close.
Well, thank you. It has been a pleasure being here. As you know, we're in campaign mode. We're in full campaign mode. We're winding down. We have about 10 days to go. And we believe the APNU plus AFC, we believe that we are the best option for Guyana at this point. We believe that our campaign has been very effective. We believe that we have what it takes to run this country. And we believe that we will win the elections based on the work that we've done, based on our campaign, based on everything else we see. We are fairly confident at this point, not overconfident. We still have a lot of work to do. And we look forward to the support of the electorate in all 10 regions of Guyana. And I know there are a lot of persons here from the diaspora. We also look forward to your support in any way that you can. And as a government, when we win the elections, we hope that we can count on your support as the government of the day. And apart from that, I want to thank everyone who's tuned in. And I want to thank Globespan for hosting us again. And thank you, Dr. Mahadeo, for being such a good host. And with that said, good night.
Thank you, and good night to all of our viewers. Let's give thanks to Globespan, Nohar Singh, Devin Bisoon, our technical guy, and the entire team. Viewers, have a wonderful evening. See you next week. Safe driving to those who are driving, and have a wonderful night at home with your family. Remember, vote, but don't hate. Good night, everyone. Good night to Mr. Gaskin.